I'm Graham.
And I'm Bryce.
And
This
is the Vents Podcast.
Yeah, the intro is going to be a little bit later.
Yeah.
Well, this is the intro.
Yeah, so this
The
is a
other stuff.
pre-recorded intro for this week and this upcoming week. If this is my testimony that you're watching, then this is the final week.
Yeah, not the final week of the podcast, but
Yeah.
the final week of this intro.
Yeah, so like I just said, we're doing our testimonies. So we try to keep it really, really base level with the Vents Podcast. We don't do political. We don't do controversial, other than like the controversies,
Yeah.
like
That are like
the
buzzing.
myths. Yeah. So we also don't want this to be a faith-based podcast, but a podcast where we can share our beliefs through different topics and not make it the focus and just make it an underlying thing.
Yeah. So, a little bit of kind of like what testimonies are, if you're not familiar. It's your personal story of you coming to faith, and then, kind of like, here's my hand. So, before faith, and then that story, and then coming to faith, and then kind of how that faith has been playing out.
Exactly.
And so I'm going to be sharing mine for the first week, and that's episode
15?
16, and maybe, I don't
know. We'll figure it out. And then I'll be sharing mine for the second week.
Yep.
But we want to make sure that you guys really know where we came from, who we are, and what we've gone through.
Yeah.
And how our relationship with God has changed our
Right.
lives, and where we're at now, and where we want to be in the future.
Right. We want you guys to know us better, and and we also don't want to alarm you because we're going to be alone during those times.
Yeah.
I was out of the room when Graham recorded his, and he was out of the room when I recorded mine.
But we know each other's
Right.
testimonies, but we wanted this is a completely different style of podcast. If you're listening, I recommend you watch. And if you're watching, I recommend you listen, because there's something that you'll get out of each one. You'll just notice different things. And if you're watching, you'll notice that it's just me or it's just Bryce and it's all black.
Yeah.
But we really were excited to share this with you guys. And yeah, I mean, I really hope that you enjoy it. And if you have anything that you want to say, feel free to leave a comment, DM us, and follow us on all of our socials.
Yeah, you can do that
yeah.
on Facebook, at Vents Podcast, Instagram, at Vents Podcast. You can comment things on YouTube, at Vents Podcast. And if you're listening, it's capital VENTS on Spotify and iTunes. Or you can tell Alexa or Google, or you can say, "Hey Siri." And yeah, other than that, get ready for some other topics as we're kind of nearing the end of this season. We hope you enjoy. Thank you for letting us vent.
See you guys.
Na 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 na, oh oh, na 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 na, oh oh, na 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 na, oh oh.
Okay, so as we just said, we're going to be doing testimonies, and this is mine. So, I grew up Christian, and I was always surrounded by my parents, who were strong Christians and brought us to church every weekend. And I remember going to, the local mega churches and churches that we had been going to for the longest time. That's like, it's always been in my memory. But I remember that I never really liked going to church when I was younger. I don't know why. I think it was the whole waking up early, even though waking up early was 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning. And that started off my faith walk. It really goes back to me just being a kid and not wanting to do that. And so over time, I grew into it and I started to like it. Up through, third, fourth grade, I was starting to go, and I wasn't having a blast going, but I knew that it was something that I needed to do and should do. And even at that age, I went to something that my church had where it's called Kids World. So it's just the youth ministry for Sunday mornings, like kids Bible school. And so I started going to that, and like end of third grade, there was something really, really bad that happened in my family. And it shook me a lot. It shook my faith, and it shook my family. And I'm not really going to get into that because it's kind of personal, and that's going to be a case throughout this. But, yeah, something really bad happened when I was in third grade, and it really affected me. And I started asking questions like, why? Like, why would this happen when we're going to church and when we're following you, God? Like, why? And so I would say that that's where the downfall started to happen with my faith. I accepted Christ when I was really young, but then I did it like 2 more times because I wasn't really sure, like, did I do this right? But yeah, so I got into 4th and 5th grade. The issue that happened kept happening, and more stuff came into play that just made life a little bit more difficult when it came to my emotions and how I was, kind of, going about my faith. And then 5th grade happened, and I started taking a medication for my ADHD, because if you guys couldn't tell from the last 2 seasons, I'm nuts, I'm hyper, I am all over the place, scatterbrained. And so I started doing that, and it caused me to be bedridden for 1 to 2 weeks. And I got something called dystonia, which is the drying of the ligaments in between your vertebrae. And normally it happens to 1 or 2 vertebrae, but it happened to almost my whole lower back and neck. And it was yet another situation where I was like, God, why? Why is this happening to me? I know that I haven't been doing as much, but why? Why am I going through this? And so once we figured out that it was the Adderall that was causing that, I got off Adderall and had a bad back for a long time. I still have a bad back, but after going through that situation, I found myself getting a hold of a lot of things that I shouldn't at such a young age. And going into middle school, it was a big change. I was not really going to church all the time. I wasn't following through with my faith. At home was really stressful, and just because everyone was at such different stages in their life. And yeah, I started drinking in 6th grade, and started smoking cigarettes and doing all that stuff in 6th grade. And then after that, 7th grade came around, and I was completely out of the church. I would maybe go to the middle school group once every few months if I really wanted to. And I was still drinking and smoking. And then I was introduced to weed, and I started smoking weed. And that's where things kind of got out of control. I was hanging out with the wrong people. God wasn't present in my life. And I found myself at a loss. Come 8th grade, I was coming up to the end of the year. I'd been going through a lot of stuff, struggling a lot with just different addictions, and just really, really screwing up my life for how young I was. And so I was hanging out with the wrong group of kids, and it came to the 4th to last day of school. The night before that school day, I snuck out at 2:30 in the morning and met in the bushes in front of Chili's with a friend of mine him and I planned to bring alcohol to school the next day and get drunk on the field trip to GameWorks, because what better thing to do than get twisted at a GameWorks. And he had been drinking that night already, And so he was very, very, very drunk. And we talked it out, I figured it out, and like my parents never had alcohol just laying around. It was always like not necessarily locked up, but it was in places that we couldn't really get to without them knowing. But there was something that I had in the garage from a couple weeks prior, and so I got that and I got gin and I put it in an orange juice bottle, and I completely like diluted it, and it was like see-through. It was one of those Welch's orange juice bottles that was like, handheld. And I filled it up with gin and a little bit of orange juice, and I brought it on the bus with me. And that day was the day that my life completely changed. So I got to school. I was texting my friend, "Hey, where are you? Like, why aren't you here? I'm looking for you. We're about to get on the bus." And that was back in the day when you couldn't have phones in middle school. Now it's like, ugh. But he wasn't answering, and the next thing I know, I feel a pat on my shoulder and then a tug, and it was my vice principal, and they're like, "You're coming with us." And moments before, I was sitting in the bathroom down by my locker by the woodworking area, like the woodworking shop room, and I was sitting in the bathroom like by the sink, and I was like almost about to pour it out. Come to find out, my friend had gotten arrested the night before for public intoxication and walking down the middle of the major road in our town. And he was picked up by the cops and told his parents and the police everything. And in turn, his parents called my parents and called the school. And they had found out and they had gotten me, and I was taken to the principal's office with a bottle of vodka, basically, or a bottle of gin and orange juice that was 3/4 drank, and I was already like slurring my words and just in a really bad spot. And I just remember like, "God, why am I here? Like, why are you doing this to me?" And at that moment when my mom showed up, after fighting it and lying and say it's my cousin's and it's this person's and it's that person's, and finally admitting it, that whole situation I acknowledged was God trying to pull me out and take me away from those negative scenarios, negative people that weren't helping me grow in my faith. And so that was a really, really rough, 6 months, because it was right before summer. I was basically grounded the whole summer, and I had to go to a bunch of meetings with therapists and other people for alcohol, and all the while I wasn't done drinking. I didn't stop anything other than smoking cigarettes, and that all changed when I got back to school, and I was like, I can't be with these people anymore. And I thought it changed, and it did for a couple months, and then I ended up going back to my old ways and hiding everything from my parents. And hiding is in air quotes because they knew what was going on, and they had suspected it, and they had talked to me about it, but I lied through my teeth. And that whole time I just go back to thinking this was happening because I needed it to. And it sounds kind of crazy if you're not someone who understands Christianity a lot, but this happened for a reason, because if it didn't happen then, it would have been 1,000,000,000,000 times worse now. And so it kept going, and come sophomore year of high school, I ended up going back to house group, which is the high school version of the middle school ministry that I didn't go to before. And I met a leader named Coach, which I'm sure he watches these every once in a while, but I met Coach, and little by little I started getting my life back on track, and stopping drinking, and stopping smoking weed and doing all these drugs and like everything slowly but surely over time. And house group is actually where I met Bryce, and I'm sure in his testimony you either heard or you will hear, because I don't know how, like, the order of which we're putting these up, but like there was times where Bryce and I would be at house group and we would be doing stupid things, and over time that got better and we stopped doing it, and we started adapting our viewpoint of house group to, okay, this is a place where we could go to have fun and like smoke cigarettes out in the back and tell them that we're catching frogs, but really we're smoking cigarettes. And like it turned into, okay, this is where we're gonna get back on track. This is where our lives are gonna be put back together. Because there was a switch. I don't know the time that it happened, but there was a switch that went off when I was there, where it was like, what benefit am I getting from doing these things? Like, how am I growing? How am I bettering the people around me? How am I bettering myself? And so what I ended up doing that summer was I went to summer camp, rededicated my life to Christ, got baptized soon thereafter, and started living for God. And mind you, all this time I was still very, very focused on the fact that I wanted to go into business. Business was my heart and my soul, and I've owned so many businesses since the age of like 4 years old. Like, I'm talking Graham's Pots in Paradise. Right there, Bryce, please put it right there. Graham's Pots in Paradise when I was 3 years old, painting terracotta pots and delivering them in a red wagon to people. And then there was Graham McDonald's advertisement company, and then there was Pinpoint Advertising, and then there was, digital marketing advertising, and there were so many businesses that I did, and I loved business. I wanted to go to school for business. And so throughout high school, I was like, I'm going to school for business. I was a horrible student. I got terrible grades because I didn't want to take medication because of the way that it made me feel. And long story short, I got through school. I graduated on time, never failed a class. Like, by the skin of my teeth, I would make banana bread for my teachers and tell them, like, oh, this isn't a bribe, but, like, if you like it, like, prove it. Because the proof is in the dough, you know what I'm saying? So I got through high school, and the next big slip up that I had was after senior year prom. I went with a friend of mine, and she was super great, and the next day, she ended up not going, but the next day, all of my senior class and a lot of other schools would go up to the Kalahari, which is like a water park, super fun, up in the Dells. It's like 3-ish hours away. And the whole plan was to get a room, drink, do drugs, like just have a blast, make it like that last, like, and I don't know what was going through my head at this time, because I was in a good place. I was applying to be a leader at my house groups. So much was going right for me. I was going to a community college in the area that next year, so that I could get my GPA up, and that was going to be great, and everything was coming together so well. And then I went to the Kalahari, and that weekend screwed me up. I went from doing really, really good for such a long time to I just hit a wall, and I fell backwards, and I fell down a mountain and hit a really low point. And it all happened in a matter of 72 hours. So we get to the Kalahari. I'm with a bunch of friends. They're already drunk because they had been drinking, like, on the car ride up. And I was driving, so I obviously wasn't drinking because I still had a brain in my head. But I got there and I started drinking and drinking and drinking, and I didn't do drugs. I didn't smoke anything, and I was drinking, and slowly but surely I started thinking it was a good idea to go on social media. And this was after I applied for my leadership role in our church's church groups, and I was posting Snapchats under the influence of alcohol, and it was very, very clear. And I had a lot of students that would be my students on my Snapchat. And it ruined me the next day, because I had ended up sending those Snapchats to my church group leader, not coach, a different church group leader. He saw them and was very concerned. And so coming up to like one of the last few weeks at house group, he pulled me aside and was like, Graham, I know what you did. Like, you have to figure this out. And he's like, you're going to be a leader. You can't be doing this. And if you are doing this, you shouldn't be a leader, and you shouldn't be posting it on social media. And I was like, I screwed up, because this is something that I wanted so bad. And at this point in time, I started hearing, what if you go into ministry? Like, God, like, pushing it in my head, but not at all like, oh, I'm going to go into ministry and this is going to be the best thing ever. Because I wanted business so bad. I wanted to make 7 figures. I wanted to make like millions of dollars and like be rich and help my family out and like just live a lavish lifestyle. And I didn't listen to it. And that had happened for years. And so what happened after I got back from the Kalahari, had that meeting with my leader, Matt, I felt that it was important that I brought what I did to the leadership of my church, to the leadership of the youth ministry in specific. And I talked to 3 of the pastors that were like the high school pastor, the youth ministry, like overarching pastor, and I think there was one other person that I talked to. I just don't remember. And I laid it all out there. I was like, I've been doing so well over the past 4 years or 2 to 3 years. And I slipped up and I posted on social media. And I really want to be a leader, but I really want this to be out in the open, and I want you to know about it because I screwed up. And it wouldn't be fair to you if I just hid this, and you would have found out anyways because it was on social media, and I just want it to come from me. And at that moment, that's when I tore off all of my like holier than thou, like up on a pedestal. Like I was like pouring my everything out on the table. And by the grace of God, those pastors let me lead students that next year for house group. And like this whole time, I was getting better, and I was fighting for my faith, and I was getting deeper, and I was going to Haiti. I was going on missions trips, and just through growth and through my time at leading at house group, I just felt something was off. Like business, I wanted to do it so bad, but something wasn't right. And so I was going to ECC. It was my second semester. I was taking a Bible as Literature class. And the first day of class, I did not know the professor. I was sitting in my seat, nice and ready to learn about the Bible, because I kept hearing ministry pop into my head. Just that one word, ministry. And I was like, God, what are you wanting me to do? God, just tell me, like tell me. I just want to know. And on my first day of Bible as Literature, the professor comes in, and I don't know this guy, and he doesn't know me. He doesn't know my family. He doesn't know anyone. He looks me straight in the eye as he walks in the classroom. He scans the room and looks at me. He's like, you, and he points at me. He's like out in the hallway. And I was like, this is a big guy. Like, he is scary. He's like as tall as me, which is very rare, but he's a big guy. And he says, why are you here? I get out in the hallway. He says, why are you here? I was like, because I'm supposed to. This is the 2 to 250 class for Bible as Literature. I'm supposed to be here, right? And he was like, this is the class that you're supposed to be in, but why are you here? And I was like, because I want to go to business school. He was like, no, you don't. And mind you, this is all in retrospect. Like, when I was applying to my business schools that I wanted to go to after this semester, this kept coming into my head. Why are you here? He's like, you're not supposed to be here, and you'll figure that out sometime in life. And I forgot his name, and I haven't been able to tell him what happened. But after my year at ECC, the local community college, I had gotten my GPA up from like a 2.2 GPA on a 5-point scale to a 3.6 GPA on a 5-point scale. So really like a 3.2 or 3.0 something on a 4-point. And my ACT scores were decent, and so I spread all of my applications out to 3 schools: Wilmington, North Carolina, Western Carolina, and Whitewater. And I had the requirements for these schools, and every single one of them got back to me and said, no, you're not accepted. And every single time that I got one of those letters that said that you're not getting into this school, ministry popped into my head. And I wasn't listening to God. And so I got really upset. And then Hurricane Harvey happened, and I went to Texas. And just before then, I started an internship with my pastor, who was incredible and life-changing. And what he taught me was like beyond what I ever could imagine. And so, long story short, because I'm running out of time, ministry kept coming up, and I said, God, I'm going to send out one application, and it's going to be to a school that is so incredible, so out of my league, because I don't deserve to be there. I'm trusting you, and if this is where you want me, and this is where you've called me, then Father, please show me. Please open the door or slam it shut. And that's exactly what he did. And just a couple weeks after that, I got into the online school here. And just after that one semester, I applied for on campus, and I got in to a major that is difficult to get into for people that are brilliant. And I don't consider myself brilliant, but I got in. And so to this day, my testimony right now is that from the beginning of my life to right now, God has been faithful. God has pushed me through some of the deepest, darkest times in my family. God has given me parents who love each other endlessly and who have taught me so much about my faith. God has given me brothers who, yes, they struggle, but brothers who love me at the end of the day and would do anything for me. And God has given me a best friend that is constantly here to build up my relationship with him. And God has given me a relationship with him. And I can't help but be overwhelmed and thankful and scared of what that means. Because I didn't realize the power of faith until I had none. So, to this day, I'm going to school to be a pastor. I don't know what kind of pastor. My major is evangelism and discipleship because I want to be a disciple who makes disciples. I want to be someone who's not afraid to share the gospel, who is going to help people to learn how to share the gospel in the best way possible. And I want to learn how to best give it all to God. Because he's the one who got me here. I don't know where I would be without him. And that's the best way that I know how to thank him. So that's my testimony. I left out chunks. There's some skipping around that was done. But that's what's great about testimonies, is that they're not perfect because we aren't. So thank you for listening. Thank you for getting to know me and allowing me to share where I've come from, where I've been, and where I hope to be. And thank you for letting me vent. See you guys.
Na na na.